I reckon there's things we carry deep inside, things we don't talk about, not even to ourselves. But tonight I'm ready to open that old box of memories and let you see what's been tucked away all these years, It's a funny thing. Just the other morning, I was sitting out on the porch, rocking slow in my old chair, when that sweet smell of apple pie drifted up from Mrs. Johnson's kitchen next door. Land sakes alive, it near knocked me right back to a night in the fall of 1961. Funny how smells can do that, isn't it? Just a whiff, and suddenly, you're not 88 sitting in a creaky chair. You're 25 again, heart skipped in like a schoolgirl's, dress still warm from the iron, waiting for someone special to come calling. It's been so many years now, but Lord have mercy, some memories cling tighter than a burr on a hound dog. I reckon there are things you tuck away deep in your heart, thinking maybe if you don't poke, they'll stay quiet. But that smell, that warm cinnamon, that brown sugar and baked apples melting together, it opened a door I hadn't stepped through in a mighty long while. And I guess it's time I dusted off that memory and shared it. Maybe it's 'cause the years have a way of sneaking up on you. Maybe it's 'cause lately the nights feel a little quieter, the mornings a little longer. Or maybe it's 'cause there ain't as many folks left who remember the way things used to be. Back in my day, you see, stories were like hand-stitched quilts, passed down one square at a time, each one a piece of living history. And if we don't share 'em, Lord knows they'll just fade away like mist over the hills come morning. So here I am, talking to you like you're sitting right across this porch table from me, a glass of sweet tea sweating in your hand, listening close. I got a story tucked up in my heart, one I reckon I've carried around heavier than a basket of wet laundry. You young folks wouldn't understand, but back then, a single evening could change the whole course of a life. One song on the radio, one smile across a county fair dance floor, one hello that sticks in your soul so deep it stays there long after the world has had its way with you. That's what happened to me, you see. And it all started that night, when the leaves were just in and the harvest moon hung fat and yellow over the fields, and I, in my best Sunday dress, stood nervously by the church hall door, praying I didn't look as flustered as I felt. Glenn, my Glenn, he was there. Lord, I didn't know then what kind of life we were going to build together. I didn't know about the babies we'd rock to sleep, or the rows of corn we'd plant side by side, or the way he'd look at me across a kitchen table 40 years down the road. I didn't know none of it. All I knew was the way my heart near about jumped clean out of my chest when he tipped his hat at me and said, "Evening, darlin'." That was all it took. That one little moment, so quick you could blink and miss it, and yet it hung in the air, heavy and bright, like one of them fireflies you used to catch in mason jars. I've thought about that night more times than I can count. Sometimes with a smile, sometimes with a tear or two. That's just the way life goes, sugar. You make do with what you got. You cherish the sweet, and you weather the storms best you can. And sitting here now, with the scent of pie and a heart full of memories, I realize maybe it's high time I share a few of those fireflies I've been keeping in jars all these years. Maybe it's time to tell you about Mama and Daddy, about Glenn, about the love and the loss and the plain everyday magic we wove into our days without even knowing it. So, if you don't mind sitting a spell with me, I'll tell you the whole thing, just like we used to, back when the world turned a little slower and folks had time to listen. Back when I was just a little thing, maybe 7 or 8 years old, the world moved slower, sweeter, like molasses pouring out of a jar on a chilly morning. I grew up in a sleepy little town down in Kentucky, not much more than a handful of dirt roads, a general store, a white steepled church, and fields that stretched out so far it felt like you could walk right off the edge of the earth if you weren't careful. Our house sat at the end of a gravel lane, a plain clapboard thing Daddy built with his own 2 hands, weathered soft and gray from years of sun and storm. We didn't have much, Lord knows we didn't, but what we had, we cared for like it was spun from gold. Mama used to say, we made do with what we had, and honey, that was plenty. I remember our little kitchen smelled of biscuits and strong coffee most mornings, with smoke curling up from the stove, and the worn floor creaking under our bare feet. Mama would hum hymns under her breath while she cooked, her apron dusted in flour, and Daddy would come in from milking the cows, his boots clumping heavy and his face already lined with the day's work before breakfast even hit the table. Us kids, we knew better than to waste or whine, Lord have mercy. That just wasn't the way things were back then. We worked hard, laughed harder, and trusted that come Sunday, we'd dress in our best and thank the good Lord for another week under his sky. I reckon I was a dreamy little girl, always staring out over those fields, imagining the world beyond the hills. I'd lay in the tall grass, listening to the bees buzz and the crows fussing, wondering if one day I'd ever see places like Nashville or maybe even far-off cities like Chicago I heard about on the crackling radio. But deep down, I never truly wanted to leave for good. My heart was stitched into that patch of earth like Mama's quilts, every piece of it familiar and warm. I believed, with all the fierce certainty of a child, that kindness was the most important thing in the world. I believed good people stayed good forever. I believed that no matter how far someone wandered, they always found their way back home. We lived simple, but we lived full. Summer times were barefoot and freckle-faced, chasing lightning bugs and sipping sweet tea so cold it could give you a headache. Winters were tight, frost crawling across the windows, us kids bundled up together under homemade quilts stitched from old shirts and feed socks. But there was always laughter by the fire, always songs hummed low to keep the dark away. Mama's voice would float up soft as the smoke from the chimney, singing "I'll Fly Away," while she mended our overalls by lamplight. Daddy, sitting nearby, would tap his foot in rhythm, his hands rough and cracked, but gentle when he'd pat my head and say, "You're a good girl, darling. Don't you ever forget it." And I didn't. Even now, all these years later, I can close my eyes and feel the roughness of that old porch rail under my fingers, smell the sharp green scent of fresh-cut hay, hear the low call of a whippoorwill at dusk. I was just a girl back then, not yet carrying the weight of love and loss, not yet knowing how fast and fierce life could turn. All I knew was that I was loved, that my world was wide and safe, and that dreams grew in fields just as sure as corn and cotton. Those days shaped me, you know. They rooted me deep in faith, in family, in the kind of quiet strength that don't shout or show off, but stands firm when the winds come howling. That little girl, with her head full of dreams and her heart full of hope, well, she's still in here somewhere, rockin' right alongside this old woman I've become. And sometimes, when the breeze is just right and the world falls real still, I swear I can hear her laugh, light and free, drifting through the trees like it never left. It was the summer of 1954, hotter than a billy goat in a pepper patch, and the county fair had rolled into town with its bright lights and candy-sweet smells. I remember standing there in my best cotton dress, the one Mama sewed up just for the occasion, nervously twisting the hem between my fingers, trying not to look like some wide-eyed country girl, though, land sakes alive, that's exactly what I was. The air was thick with the sound of laughter, the creak and groan of the Ferris wheel, and the scent of popcorn and fresh hay. I wasn't looking for anything special that night, no sir. Just hoping for a good time with my sister and maybe a pink spun sugar cloud of cotton candy. But you know how life is sometimes. It's when you're minding your own business that the good Lord goes and flips your world upside down. I was standing by the pie contest tent, listening to the old-timers argue about whose apple pie could bring a man to tears, when I saw him, Glenn, Tall, with a grin that could have melted the butter clean off a biscuit, and a pair of hands that looked like they knew real work. He had that way about him, easy but sure, like he belonged right where he was. Our eyes met for just a second, but Lord have mercy, my heart kicked up like a colt spooked by a snake. I couldn't explain it, not then, and maybe not even now, but something inside me just knew. It wasn't like in the storybooks, no firecrackers or choirs of angels, just this deep, sure feeling like two puzzle pieces finally sliding into place. He tipped his hat, nodded polite, and said, "Evening, ma'am," and I swear, my knees about gave out right there on the dusty fairground. You young folks wouldn't understand, but back then, a simple howdy could carry more weight than 1,000 fancy speeches. I muttered something back, couldn't tell you what if he paid me, and he just smiled wider, like he could see right through my bashfulness and didn't mind one bit. Turns out he was helping his uncle run the livestock show, and before I knew it, we was walking side by side down the rows of prize hogs and heifers, talking like we'd known each other all our lives. I told him about Daddy's farm, about Mama's Sunday pot roasts, about how I dreamed of one day sewing quilts just like my granny did. He listened, really listened, with that kind of steady attention most folks don't bother giving no more. Every now and again, he'd chuckle low, and I'd feel it buzz right through me like a fiddle string plucked tight. There was music playing from the dance tent, something sweet and slow, maybe Patsy Cline or one of them new fellas like Elvis, and before I knew what was happening, Glenn was holding out his hand, a skin if I'd like to dance. Lord have mercy, I thought I might faint dead away. I nodded, and he led me out under the string lights, the air heavy with honeysuckle and hay. We swayed slow, not saying much, but it didn't matter. Every step was a conversation, every touch a promise I didn't quite understand yet, but wanted more than breath itself. That night changed everything. I didn't know it then, standing barefoot in the cool grass, after the music ended, looking up at the stars like they was winking just at me, but my life had taken a turn down a road I hadn't even seen coming. It wasn't just Glenn I found that night. It was the first true taste of the life I was meant to live. A life of love, of hardship, of building something with my own two hands and someone who'd stand beside me come hell or high water. I went home that night with dust on my dress, a daisy tucked behind my ear, and a heart beating so loud I couldn't hardly sleep. And though many a year has come and gone since that county fair, I can still feel it, that first tremble of something big and beautiful talking root deep inside me. Sometimes life don't announce itself with a bang. Sometimes it tiptoes in quiet like on a summer night, with a smile and a howdy that sets your whole world to changin'. The first years after Glenn and I got married were sweeter than sweet tea on a Sunday, but you know, life's got a funny way of testing you just when you start thinking you've got your feet under you. We moved into a little clapboard house not too far from Mama and Daddy's place, with a tin roof that sang soft when it rained and dreams bigger than our britches. Glenn worked sunup to sundown on a neighbor's farm while we saved up for a patch of land of our own, and I took in sewing and helped Mama can and pickle every vegetable that would stand still long enough. We didn't have much, but we had love, and back in those days, that counted for something. But then the drought came. Lord have mercy, I still remember the way the fields cracked open like parched lips, the way the sky stayed mean and white, not a drop of rain for what felt like forever. Glenn's work dried up right along with the crops, and before we knew it, we were counting pennies just to keep the lights on. It was a hard pill to swallow, watching him come home day after day with his shoulders sagging like a man carrying the whole world on his back. And me, well, I tried to be strong, tried to keep my chin up and the house clean and supper hot, but deep inside, I was scared near to death. I didn't say it out loud, no ma'am. Back then, you didn't go talking about your fears like folks do nowadays. You just stitched 'em into your quilts and baked 'em into your pies and hoped they stayed tucked away where nobody could see 'em. But every night when I laid my head down next to Glenn's, I could feel that big old lump of worry growing in my chest, heavy as a sack of wet laundry. It wasn't just the money, though Lord knows that was bad enough. It was the whispers. Folks in town, some of 'em thought Glenn should pack us up and head north, like so many others were doing. Plenty of factory jobs up there, they said. Ain't no future for young folks down here no more. Mama even pulled me aside one Sunday after church, her face all tight and worried, and said, "Baby girl, maybe it's time y'all moved on. Ain't no shame in wantin' a better life." I nodded and smiled and hugged her close, but inside, I felt torn clean in two. You see, I loved Glenn with everything I had, but the thought of leaving home, of letting go of everything familiar, it near about broke me. That red clay dirt, that old white church, those wraparound porches where folks waved howdy no matter who you were, it wasn't just land. It was my roots, my blood, my whole sense of who I was. Glenn, bless his heart, tried to make light of it. He'd joke and say, "We'll figure it out, darling. We always do." But I could see it in his eyes, the same fear, the same doubt gnawing at him like a dog on a bone. Nights when he thought I was sleeping, he'd sit out on the porch, staring up at that big empty sky, smoking one of the hand-rolled cigarettes he kept hidden from me like a schoolboy hiding candy. I reckon we both knew a decision was coming, one way or another. Stay and risk losing everything, or leave behind the only life we'd ever known and pray the world was kinder somewhere else. There was no easy choice, no clear right or wrong. Just a lot of heavy hearts and silent prayers whispered into the dark. And though I tried to be brave, Lord knows I did, there were nights I buried my face in the quilt Mama made me for my wedding day and cried so soft I thought even God might not hear me. I felt ashamed, like maybe I wasn't strong enough, like maybe loving Glenn wasn't gonna be enough to see us through. That was the first time I realized life don't always hand you neat little packages with bows on top. Sometimes it hands you a knotted mess of hope and fear and says, "Here, figure it out best you can." And there we were, young and scared and holding on to each other like driftwood in a flood, praying we wouldn't get swept away. It was a Wednesday afternoon, hotter and blue blazes, even though fall was just starting to creep in. I remember it clear as yesterday, the way the light slanted through the dusty kitchen window, catching on the flowers still sitting on the counter where I'd been making biscuits, the soft creak of the screen door as it swung open and shut with the wind. Glenn had gone into town that morning, something about trying to talk to Mr. Hawkins down at the mill about work. I'd watched him go, standing there in the doorway with my apron still tied around my waist, wiping my hands on it, whispering a little prayer under my breath. "Please, Lord, just give us a little break." Funny how you think you're praying for one thing and the Lord answers with something altogether different. The knock on the door came late that afternoon, sharp and sure, not like Glenn's usual easy way of tapping his knuckles against the wood. I knew something was wrong before I even turned the knob. It was Sheriff Randall standing there, hat clutched in his hands, his eyes heavy and sad in a way that made my stomach twist right up into my throat. I don't remember everything he said. It was like the world started humming, low and mean like a swarm of bees in my ears. Words like accident and didn't suffer floated around me, but none of 'em made real sense. I remember dropping to my knees right there on the porch, the wood planks hot and rough against my skin, screaming without even hearing myself. I remember Mama's arms around me, her voice soft and breaking at the edges, saying over and over, "Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy." I remember the way the clock inside the house ticked on, stubborn and steady, like it didn't care the world had just come to a screeching halt. I swear, for a moment, time did stop. The air was thick and still, and I felt like I was floating outside myself, watching a girl I barely recognized clutch her apron, like it could somehow stitch her heart back together. Glenn was gone, just like that. A slip on the mill floor, a fall that broke his neck quick and sure. One second he was planning a future for us, dreaming about babies and a little farm of our own, and the next, he was just gone. I'd always known, deep down, that life could turn cruel. I'd seen it happen to neighbors, to folks from church, but not to me. Not to us. We were supposed to be the lucky ones. We had love, didn't we? We had dreams stacked up higher than the sky. But dreams don't mean much to a world that don't promise nothing. And loss, well, loss don't send you a warning. It just comes, fast and mean, and leaves you picking up the pieces with bloody hands. For weeks after, I moved through the days like a ghost. I kept cooking, cleaning, doing all the things a woman was supposed to do. But inside, I was hollowed out, emptied like an old gourd left too long in the sun. At night, I'd lay on Glenn's side of the bed, my hand stretching out to find him, find something solid, and coming up with nothing but cold, wrinkled sheets. I felt shame, too. Lord help me, shame that maybe I hadn't prayed hard enough, hadn't been good enough, hadn't deserved to keep the one good thing I had. And fear, like a black crow perched heavy on my chest, whispering that without Glenn, I was nothing but a broken thing drifting on the wind. That was the moment, I reckon, when I stopped being a girl with dreams and started being a woman who understood how life could gut you clean through. That's when I learned that loving someone didn't mean you got to keep That's when I realized that the world don't owe you nothing, not love, not mercy, not even a fair warning. It just keeps tuning, whether you're ready or not. And somehow, even when your heart is shattered into 1,000 sharp little pieces, you get up the next morning, you tie your apron strings a little tighter, and you keep breathing, even if it hurts with every single breath. After Glenn passed, the world didn't end like I thought it might. It just got quieter, slower, meaner in a way only silence can be. Mornings still came, but they didn't bring with them the same kind of light. I got up, put the coffee on, swept the floors that didn't need sweeping, mended clothes that didn't need mending. I kept busy, 'cause I was scared of what might come creeping in if I ever stood still too long. There's a hollowness to grief they don't tell you about, not just the missing of the person, but the missing of who you were when they were around. I wasn't the same girl who danced under the fairground lights or sewed quilts full of big, wild dreams. No, sir. I was quieter now, smaller somehow, like a house after a storm that's still standing, but missing a few windows and all its pretty paint. Folks were kind, bringing casseroles and pies, saying all the right things time heals. He's in a better place, but their words just floated past me like autumn leaves in a river. I smiled polite, nodded when I was supposed to, and then went back to my empty little house and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wall where Glenn's hat used to hang. Land's sakes, even the air felt different without him. I tried to go back to church, sitting stiff in the pew between Mama and my sister, singing the old hymns with a voice that didn't seem to belong to me no more. I tried to bow my head and believe, really believe, that the good Lord had a plan, that there was some reason for all this hurt. But truth be told, I was mad. Mad at God, mad at Glenn for leaving, mad at myself for still breathing when it felt like I ought to have gone with him. I didn't say it out loud, no ma'am. Good girls didn't question the Lord's ways. But deep down, the anger festered, slow and sour, making every prayer taste like ash in my mouth. I stopped sewing for a spell. Couldn't bring myself to hold a needle steady, much less piece together something whole and pretty when my insides felt like a pile of racks. Days blurred into each other, laundry, Dishes sitting on the porch watching the world go by without me. Sometimes I'd see young couples walking hand in hand past the house. Logan easy, eyes all bright with dreams, and it would hit me so hard it near took my breath away. That used to be me. I used to believe the world was wide open, full of possibilities as the summer sky. Now all I could see were closed doors and empty fields. One night, I sat out on the porch, rocking slow in the dark, the crickets humming low all around me, and I realized if I didn't find a way to start living again, I was gonna turn to dust right there in that chair. The thought scared me worse than dying ever did. I didn't have answers, didn't have some big revelation like in the storybooks. I just had the tiniest flicker of stubbornness left, like a coal buried deep in cold ashes. Maybe it wasn't hope exactly, but it was something that whispered real soft, "Get up, girl. Keep going, Dot." The world didn't go back to what it was. It never does. But bit by bit, I learned to live with the emptiness, to let it sit beside me without talking over. I learned that grief ain't something you get over like a bad cold. It's something you carry, something that shapes you, softens you in some places and hardens you in others. I wasn't the same woman who had stood barefoot on the county fair lawn, heart full to bustin'. But maybe, just maybe, there was still a little life left in me yet. Maybe after all that breakin' and hurtin', there was still some part of me that could learn to bloom again, even if it looked different than before. I reckon it was a stray kitten that started it, though at the time I didn't think nothing of it. Just one of those scrappy little things, all ribs and big sad eyes, mewing something pitiful out by the woodpile one drizzly morning. I was standing at the sink, staring out the window like I'd done 1,000 mornings before, my hands still wet from scrubbing a dish that didn't really need washing, when I saw him, all scrawny and shivering, looking so small in that big, mean world. Part of me wanted to turn away. I was still hunting something fierce, still wrestling with the kind of tired that don't come from working, but from carrying sorrow too long. But something, maybe that stubborn little coal that hadn't quite gone out, made me grab an old towel and step out onto the porch. The kitten tried to run, but he was too weak to get far. I scooped him up gentle, wrapping him tight, feeling the way his tiny heart beat against my palm like a drum trying to call life back. I didn't cry. Lord knows I'd already cried oceans by then. But as I held that little creature, something cracked open inside me, just a hairline crack, mind you, but enough to let in a sliver of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe mercy, maybe hope. I brought him inside, fed him scraps of chicken and warm milk, and set up a box by the fire. I didn't name him right off, didn't want to admit to Karen just yet, but he stayed, and I let him. Day after day, that little thing grew stronger. He'd follow me from room to room, mewing and rubbing against my ankles, demanding attention in a way I hadn't known how much I needed. It's a funny thing, taking care of something again. It pulls you out of yourself, out of that dark pit where grief likes to settle and fester. I started sewing again, first just mending torn curtains and patching old quilts, but soon enough, my fingers remembered how to piece beauty together from scraps. I made a new quilt, bright and stubborn with color, not because I needed it, Lord knows I had plenty, but because I needed to remember that I could still make something that wasn't broken. Folks at church started noticing. Miss Patty asked if I'd help organize the next potluck, and somehow I said yes. Next thing I knew, I was standing in the fellowship hall, Logan over pies and casseroles with women who knew better than to ask too many questions. They just let me be, let me come back slow, like coaxing a scared animal out of the woods. It wasn't no big moment, no flash of light or grand revelation. Just a string of tiny kindnesses, a handful of choices made on days when it would have been easier to stay curled up in bed and let the world spin without me. And somewhere along the way, I realized that maybe life didn't end with loss. Maybe it just shifted, took a new shape. Smaller, humbler, stitched together with quiet grace instead of loud dreams. I still missed Glenn. I reckon I always would. There's holes grief leaves that nothing ever quite fills. But that didn't mean there wasn't still sweetness left to find. In a soft purr, a patchwork quilt, a pie shared between friends, a sunrise spilling gold across a worn porch floor. Maybe second chances don't look like new loves or faraway adventures. Maybe they look like learning how to smile again, even if it's a little crooked. Maybe they look like tucking a tiny, half-starved kitten into your arms and letting yourself believe that not everything precious has to slip away. That was the beginning of my second life, though I didn't know it yet. It was quieter, slower, stitched together with sorrow and hope alike. And land sakes, it was beautiful in its own tender way. It wasn't any one big thing that made me decide. No lightning bolt from heaven, no voice thundering down telling me what to do. It was a quiet morning, same as 100 others, when the sun spilled soft across the porch and the little cat, I'd finally named him Lucky, curled up in my lap, purring steady as a heartbeat. I was rocking slow, the creak of the chair keeping time with the breeze, and I realized clear as a bell I didn't want to spend whatever days I had left mourning what I'd lost. I'd done my weeping. Lord knows I'd cried enough tears to float Noah's Ark twice over. I'd worn my grief like a heavy coat through every season, letting it weigh me down, letting it define who I thought I had to be. But sitting there with the sun on my face and a warm little life trusting me to stay, I knew in my bones it was time to lay it down. Not to forget Glenn land sakes, no, but to stop letting my sadness be the biggest thing about me. I sat there a long time, letting the breeze tangle my hair, letting the old memories roll over me one last time like a tide pulling back to sea. And then I got up. I went inside and pulled down a dusty box from the top of the wardrobe, the one I'd packed away the day after the funeral, stuffed full of every little thing that still smelled of him. Shirts he'd worn, letters he'd written, the old straw hat he wore to mow the pasture. My hands trembled as I opened it, breathing in the faded scent of sweat and sunshine and something sweeter still, love, pure and simple. I sat on the floor, cross-legged like a girl, and I cried. Not the angry, broken sobs I'd cried in those early days, but soft, grateful tears. Tears for the years we had. Tears for the laughter, the fights, the long drives down dirt roads with the windows down and Patsy Cline humming low from the radio. Tears for the babies we never got to raise, for the porch swings that swung empty, for all the what coulda beens. I let it all out. Every ache, every longing, every scrap of guilt I didn't even know I'd been carrying. And when there were no more tears left, I folded each piece of Glenn's life back into the box, not to hide it away again, but to honor it. I tied the lid with a length of old twine, kissed it soft, and tucked it high up in the attic, not as a burden, but as a treasure. Something that shaped me but didn't have to shackle me. I walked out onto the porch, wiped my eyes with the hem of my apron, and stood there looking out at the fields gone gold with late summer. The world was still tuning. The crickets were still singing. And I was still breathing. By the grace of God. I realized, right then and there, that living wasn't about forgetting or pretending the hurt never happened. It was about carrying it with you, not like a wound, but like a scar you weren't ashamed to show. Proof you'd loved deep and lost deep and kept on walking anyway. I chose, in that quiet breath of a moment, to live, not in the shadow of sorrow, not weighed down by what might have been. Just live, plain and simple. Find sweetness where I could, help where I could, laugh when the chance came, even if it made my voice crack. Love again, maybe not with the wild abandon of a girl at the county fair, but with the steady, tender heart of a woman who knew just how precious, how fleeting, this whole beautiful mess of a life could be. I chose to stay in the world, messy and broken and achingly beautiful as it was. And land sakes alive, that choice, that simple, stubborn, everyday choice, saved me. Funny thing about living long enough, you get to see how everything changes, and at the same time, how nothing really does. Back when I was a slip of a girl, I thought the world was solid, sure as sunrise. I thought love would last forever just because it ought to. I thought hard work was a guarantee and good people always got a fair shake. Lord, I had a heart full of trust and pockets empty of much else. Now here I sit, gray at the temples, lines etched deep around my mouth from Logan and crying in equal measure, and I can tell you plain, the world will knock you down. Folks'll disappoint you. Dreams'll crumble like dry pie crust in your hands. But here's what I know for sure, it's not about whether the hard times come. They will, sure as summer thunder. It's about what you do when you're standing knee-deep in the wreckage. You can stay there, staring at what's broken, mourning what's lost, till your soul dries up. Or you can pick up what pieces you can find, stitch 'em together best you know how, and carry on. Not perfect, not the way you dreamed it would be, but still beautiful in a way only things that have survived can be. I reckon most folks spend too much time waiting for the right moment, the right words, the right feeling. Waiting for grief to leave them alone, for the hurt to go quiet, for some sign from above that it's okay to be happy again. And I get it, Lord knows I do. But let me tell you something, sugar, if you keep waiting for life to be easy or tidy or fair, you'll miss the whole dang thing. Life ain't about waiting. It's about living, even when your hands are shaky and your heart's patched together with hope and stubbornness. I wasted a lot of good days waiting for the ache to ease, thinking maybe one morning I'd wake up and the hurt would be gone. But hurt's part of the deal, just like Logan is, and sunshine and good strong coffee is shared on a quiet porch. I reckon the secret, if there is one, is letting all of it live together inside you. The sorrow and the sweetness, the fear and the faith, and still standing up every morning to see what the day's got for you. If there's one thing I could tell you, sitting here with the breeze kissing my cheeks and the memories rustling like dry corn in the field, it's this. Don't you go waiting your life away. Don't you waste your one precious heart wishing for a life without cracks and bruises. The cracks are where the light gets in, sugar. The bruises mean you were brave enough to try. Maybe you're sitting there right now, thinking you'll be ready to live again when the pain eases, or the fear quiets down, or the world gets kinder. Maybe you're telling yourself you need more time. And maybe you do. But maybe, just maybe, it's time to take one small step anyway. To laugh, even if your voice shakes. To plant something green and stubborn in the dirt. To sing an old hymn even if you forget half the words. Maybe it's time to set a place at the table for your sadness, but also for your joy. To let 'em both sit down and know they belong. I ain't got all the answers, never did. But I know this. Life's too short and too beautiful to live it halfway. We weren't made to be perfect. We were made to love, to break, to heal, and to keep on loving anyhow. So, if you're listening, if you're wondering when the time will be right, maybe it's now. Maybe it's today. Maybe it's time you stopped waiting and started living, just as you are, with all your cracks and all your light spilling out for the world to see. Well, if you've sat with me this long, bless your heart. I reckon you know by now, this wasn't just a story about a girl and a boy at a county fair, or a hard season of loss, or even a second chance found in the smallest of places. It's a story about living, plain and simple, about how love leaves its fingerprints on a soul, how grief carves out hollows you never expected, and how somehow, against all odds, life keeps reaching out for you, inviting you back into its mess and its wonder. I sit here now in this same creaky rocker with Lucky purring by my feet and the late afternoon sun stretching long shadows across the porch, and I wonder, what do you carry with you? What loves and losses have made you who you are? Have you ever stood at a crossroads, heartbreaking, wondering if you'd ever find your way back to yourself? I'd bet my last jar of peach preserves you have. And that's all right, sugar. That's living. That's being human. You know, sometimes late at night, when the world's gone still and the stars are blinking like old friends overhead, I feel him, my Glenn, close as breath. Maybe it's just memories. Maybe it's just the way love refuses to leave even after the body's gone. But sometimes, I swear I hear the soft creak of the porch step, the familiar weight of him sitting down beside me, silent and sure. And sometimes, just sometimes, I can almost hear him chuckle low and say, "You done good, darling." And Lord, that's enough to carry me another day. So I'll ask you, sitting wherever you are, listening with your own worn heart, do you think true love ever really leaves us? Or maybe, just maybe, it finds ways to stay, tucked into an old song, a warm breeze, a sunrise that feels like a hug you didn't know you needed. I don't pretend to have all the answers. All I know is what I've lived, that love doesn't end with goodbye, and sorrow doesn't get the last word unless you let it. That even broken hearts can still beat strong and steady, carrying all the love they've ever known like a torch to light the way home. I guess what I'm trying to say is this: don't be afraid of the cracks in your life, or the goodbyes you didn't want, or the dreams that changed shape along the way. They're all part of the story, sugar. They're the stitches that hold the quilt together. And maybe, just maybe, your greatest loving and living is still ahead of you, even if it looks different than you imagined. So go on, laugh too loud, dance even if your feet ache, tell folks you love while you still can. Make your life a story worth telling, stitched with courage and soaked in grace. And if ever you find yourself sitting quiet, wondering if the best parts are behind you, remember this woman's words: sometimes the sweetest chapters come after the hardest pages. And sometimes, if you listen real close, you'll hear the footsteps of someone you thought you lost, walking right beside you still. So tell me, sweet one, do you believe true love ever really fades? Or do you reckon, like me, that some things are just too strong, too good, to ever be gone for good? I like to think on nights when the wind carries just the right kind of whisper, that he remembers, that he's out there somewhere, smiling that easy smile of his, saying, "Save me a seat, darling. I'll be along before you know it."